want to show everybody my 6 new archival colors, and I'm going to show you what they look like on a different surface. So we'll start with peat moss. If you like water and can, this is an awesome, awesome, awesome background color. It's just really, really pretty. This is bluebird, a gorgeous blue. I'm going to have to say everyone's gorgeous because they are. Next one we have poppy, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is prickly pear, kind of a yellowish green. This is thistle. It's a really pretty purplish color. And then for sure I needed another brown, so we have acorn. So archival inks are translucent, and I get questions a lot of times like my ink color doesn't look the same as yours, and it depends on what surface you put this on, and this is what I wanted you to see. So if I take bluebird, I'll start with that one. And I'm going to add color to each one of these surfaces. So this is my new perfect white cardstock. It's 110 pound, it comes from Nina, so it's excellent quality. Super smooth surface, so it's great for stamping, great for stenciling. And you'll see how beautiful the color is. And I really wanted white because I wanted the beautiful archival colors to show through. So I'm just going to ink one corner of this to show you what that looks like. So that's what bluebird looks like on white. Okay, so now if I switch to the heavy stock tag, same color, I'm going to stick with the bluebird, and I'm going to ink one corner so that I can line these all up, and you'll see an amazing difference between the colors, and it's all because they're translucent inks. So same color, and this is my perfect gray cardstock, so same as the white but gray. So what's this color going to look like on gray? You'll be amazed how pretty it is. The gray kind of mutes the colors, and it's really awesome. And I think this really shows how valuable the inks are, because you can have one ink pad, and look at the 3 colors you get out of that one ink pad out of bluebird. So you can see on white, on the heavy stock, and then on the perfect gray cardstock. Dramatic difference. So let's do another color. So what if we switch to, this time we'll switch to poppy. And I'll do the same thing, ink each corner so that you can see what it actually looks like. And because they're translucent, the more ink you add, the darker the color will get. Okay, so that's poppy on white. Next I'll do poppy on the heavy stock tag. Big difference there. And then I'll add it to my perfect gray cardstock. And that's really pretty too. Okay, so now if I line these up, you'll see 3 really unique colors that does not look like it came from the same ink pad. So what I wanted you to understand is the surface matters when you're using the archival inks, because they're translucent and your base color really affects the final outcome. So I hope that gives you an idea to think about that. Thanks so much for stopping by. Hi, I'm Wendy Vecchi. I get a lot of questions about what the difference is between distress and archival inks, and I thought I would do just a quick little overview to help you choose the best ink for your project. Hi, I wanted to go over some basic properties of inks with you, and I think that'll help you decide what inks you need for your next project. So here we have Tim's Distress Archival. These are a water-based dye ink. So these are never going to be permanent. They will always react with water. They're going to always blend and bleed and make beautiful color combinations, and that's exactly what Tim wanted. So a dye ink that's water-based. My archivals and all the other Ranger archivals are also a dye ink, but these are oil-based. So these have different properties. They're acid-free, permanent, and waterproof. But it's also a dye ink, so I kind of have to keep that in mind. Do I want something that's going to react with water, or do I want something that's permanent? So why do these 2 inks work together so well? If you think about this, this is water-based, and the archivals are oil-based. So water and oil, like a bottle of salad dressing, never completely mixes, and that's why these 2 work perfectly together. So if I have a distressed background, can I stamp or stencil with archival on the top? Yes, I can. And if I do an archival background, I can also add distress over the top, and there's no competition between the inks. They work very well together. Can I stencil with both of these? Yes. Can I stamp with both of them? Yes. Can I wash something that I've stamped on fabric? No. This one will wash away. This one will be permanent. They work together really well. These are a translucent ink also, so if you put those over text, you're always going to see the text through these inks. And because they're translucent, the more ink you add, the darker the color is going to get. So the new kid on the block is the Distress Oxide, which is a completely different animal. You'll see it's in a gray case compared to the black case. And this one is really cool. It is a dye pigment fusion, but it's opaque, so it's going to be more like a paint. So if I put this over text, I'm going to cover up the text, which is really cool because that allows you to add multiple layers. So I hope that's just a quick little overview of your inks. I hope that helps you choose the correct ink for your project.
Hi everyone, it's Patty Behan, and thank you for tuning in today. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this darling birthday card, and I'll be using the Wendy Vecchi Make Art New Chippies, her stamped stencil die set, some liquid pearls, her archival inks, and even do some embossing. So let's get started. To begin, I have here chippies from her Blossoms set. There's 12 different flowers that come in this set, and then I'm also using the wreath set, and this one has 2 laurel wreaths and 2 bows. So I picked 5 flowers from the set. You can pick whatever flowers you want, and one of these laurel wreaths. The chippies are already primed, but since they're a little off-white in color, I wanted to paint them with gesso so that the true colors of the liquid pearls will come through. So my pieces don't move around a lot, I'm going to tack them down with some glue dots before I paint them. Okay, and once that's done, I'll put some gesso onto the craft sheet here. And I'm working on the Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, and I have her craft sheet. And then I'm using a mini ink blending tool with flat foam, and I'll just dab the gesso on top of all these pieces here. And then once that's done, we're going to let this dry, and we'll come back and we'll start painting. Alright, now that these are dry, I'm ready to paint. But first, I'm going to cut this up a little bit because I'm going to use this wreath in different ways. So I'm going to cut off the top 3 leaves on this side. And then I'll repeat the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to trim off the first pair of leaves over here, flush to the leaves. You don't need any stem. This is going to be a butterfly, and then I'll repeat the same thing on this side, and that's the other side of my butterfly. And then we're going to just paint that other piece like so, and again I'm going to attach them with glue dots to my craft sheet to make them easier to paint. Okay, the first color I'm going to use is Wendy Vecchi's Prickly Pear, and I'll put some on the craft sheet here, and then I'll use some Night Sky. I'm going to mix these colors together to make like a darker green, and I'm using a Ranger Artist brush. I believe this is a number 6 brush. And next, after I do the leaves, I'm going to use some Carnation Red, and I'll start painting the flowers. And as I'm switching colors here, I'm cleaning out my brush. Next is Sunflower. And another thing about liquid pearls, you can use this as a watercolor. I'm using it straight on, but if you want, you can add a little more water and watercolor with the liquid pearls. They have a shimmery, pearlescent look to them. This is Orange Blossom now. And you can also just squeeze them straight out of the bottle for a raised accent. And I'll just continue to paint the flowers. You can really paint them any colors that you like. There's so many different colors of liquid pearls. Once you're finished painting the flowers, I'll go ahead with the Prickly Pear and highlight the leaves a little bit. And then after that, I'll color in my butterfly wings, and I'm using Carnation Red and then some Ranger White Opal liquid pearls, and I'll mix those together to make a pink for the wings. And then after that, I'll use Violet to just highlight the middle of the wing a little bit. Once you're finished painting, we'll just put this aside to dry and I'll see you at the next step. Alright, now we're ready to do some embossing. I have here the Wendy Vecchi Make Art Stamp Die Stencil set called Birthday Bash, and I'll be stamping with this sentiment. And I already have it on my acrylic block here, and I'll use Letter It Embossing ink pad in clear to ink up the stamp. Actually, before I stamp this down, I want to use our anti-static pouch and just rub it across my piece of black cardstock here, and this will help the embossing powder from fluming and sticking to places where you don't want it. And I have some Ranger white superfine detail powder. Since this is a small stamp with tiny letters, it's best to use a fine grade embossing powder. And I'll pour it over top and take the excess off, and then I'll put that excess back into the jar, and then we'll emboss it until it melts. And this is what it looks like when it's done, and we'll put that aside and go on to the next thing. Okay, so now we're ready to make our background. I have a Wendy Vecchi perfect cardstock panel trimmed to 3 3/4 by 5 inches long. And again, I'm going to take the Birthday Bash set and I'll use the stencil this time. And I'm going to use the bottom portion and we'll line it up flush with the bottom of the card here and place the magnets on here to hold it. And then, since I don't want to get ink on the card over top here, I'm going to mask off that section with some Dina Wakley media tape. And then once that's done, I'm going to use the leaf green Archival ink. And then I have a mini ink blending tool with dome foam, and I'll ink up the foam and then just color in that bottom portion of the stencil. Okay, and once that's done, see how you have that nice crisp edge? Now we're going to ink the top portion and make kind of like a sky. So, this time I'm masking just with a piece of paper, and I'm using sky blue ink with the blending foam just to get a subtle little background there. Alright, I think now we're ready to put it all together. Now that all the pieces are dry, we're ready to put them together. I trimmed down my sentiment like so, and then now I'm going to cut up this laurel here, and I'll start by cutting it in the center. And I'm just going to use some of these pieces, not the whole thing. So I think I'll start with this one, and I'll cut it off right here. Like so. So I have a little stem at the bottom, and we'll tuck it under the sentiment like that. And then I'll just keep playing around with these pieces, and I'll make a little garden, adding the flowers on top of the stems and adding some extra leaves. There's my butterfly. And I think that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to make the middle part of my butterfly, and I just have a black twist tie, and I'm folding it in half and twisting the bottom portion. You could also use some black wire if you have some. And I'm just seeing if this is the right length. And I'm going to twist this a little more, and I'll flatten that edge there. And then I'll make the antenna and trim it off a little bit. I think that looks good. And I put some foam on the back of this sentiment, and then I'm going to glue down the rest of the pieces with glue dots, and I'll be right back. Okay, now all of our pieces are glued down, and you can see the texture and the shimmer of the Liquid Pearls paint. and I'm going to attach it with some double-sided tape, and I'll take off the liner paper, and this is a Wendy Vecchi top folding card, and I'll just place it onto the center, and then you'll just press it down and you're finished. You have this bright and cheerful birthday card. So if you'd like to give this project a try, we have a link to the supply list in the description box below. And if you'd like to see more crafty videos, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks again. Hello everyone, it's Patty Behan, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. In this video, we're going to be making this beautiful shabby chic tag, and I'll be using a ton of distressed products here. I have some distressed ink pads, new Archival ink colors, new embossing glazes, and Ideology and Tim Holtz stamps and stencils. So let's get started. To begin, we're going to do all of our stamping first. I have this beautiful flower shop stamp set by Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous, and a Dina Wakley Media number 10 white tag, and some collage paper by Dina Wakley Media. And I'm going to do all of my stamping first and a little embossing. So I'm first going to take this rose stamp and put it on an acrylic stamping block. I'll be using some Archival ink to color the stamp, some fired brick, and then rustic wilderness. And then I'll be doing some embossing using twisted citron and candied apple embossing glaze. And since Archival ink is oil-based, you can emboss with it if you work pretty quickly. So I'm getting everything ready. I'm opening up my jars of embossing glaze. I'm getting some scrap paper ready so I can pour the excess onto that. And I'll start by coloring the stamp with fired brick, and I'll just color in the top of the rose here. And then I'll take rustic wilderness for the leaves and stamp it off to the side on the tag, and quickly pour on the candied apple over the rose, and then move that aside and pour the twisted citron over the leaves. And once the embossing powder is on there, we can put this aside and return all the excess powders back into the jar. And then we can go ahead and use our heat tool to heat emboss the rose. And once that's done, the Archival ink dries to a nice glossy finish, and that's going to help it stand out as we make our background later on. Okay, now that that's finished, we're going to put that aside and let it cool, and we're going to continue stamping. I'll grab that collage paper, and I'm going to use the same rose stamp, and I'm going to start with the rustic wilderness again for the leaves, and then the fired brick for the top of the flower, and just stamp it onto the paper. Now I'm going to take this script stamp and ink it up with some wild honey, and we'll stamp that once as well. Again, we'll set this aside and go on to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to work on the background of the tag. I'm using a Tim Holtz Collection lace stencil by Stampers Anonymous, and I'll place it flush on the tag like so. And then I'll be using the Distress Embossing Dabber, and I'll dab the embossing ink through the stencil, and first I'm getting it started. And then once the ink is flowing, we'll just dab the ink through the stencil, and you want to make sure not to scrub the ink on there, just dab it on there. Try to be gentle because there is a spongy top that you could scrub off if you press too hard through the stencil. Okay, and once that's done, we'll take a piece of scrap paper, and I'm using speckled egg distress embossing glaze over top, and make sure you get all of the spots. And you'll notice I didn't go real heavy on the embossing ink by the rose. This way it will stand out more. So now I'm melting the embossing glaze with the heat tool. And then you'll see as it is melting, it gets that pretty shine to it. And I'll bring it closer so that you can see that there. And we just have to let this cool a second because we're going to start working on the background. So I have my pieces here that I stamped before, and I cut them out close to the edge of the stamp. And I'm going to add some of my script writing at the top and the bottom. And the flower I'm going to turn over so that I have a reverse image. You can still see the stamping through the tissue paper. And I'm going to glue it down with some Distress Collage Medium and a palette knife. First, we'll put some Collage Medium on the back of the stamped image, and then we'll stick it down, and then we'll put some more Collage Medium on the top. But when you do that, make sure you're only getting the Collage Medium on the paper, because we're inking the background, and any Collage Medium that gets past the paper and on the tag will resist the ink. That could end up looking cool, but since this is a white background and we're going to grunge it up a bit, it might not give the results that you would like. Okay, so now we've let our tag dry and we're ready to ink up the background. I have some Distress ink pads, and I'm going to start with spun sugar, and then I have a mini ink blending tool with foam, and I'll make sure I get lots of ink onto the foam, and we'll just ink up the entire background using a swirling motion, and we'll just keep going until the entire background is covered. And then after that, we're going to add another color, and that's going to be antique linen. And then we'll go ahead and use some vintage photo after that. And we're just layering to create different colors. I'm adding some more spun sugar. And then last, we'll give it some walnut stain on the edges here. Okay, and once that's done, we're going to add some droplets of water and just lightly press the trigger so that drops come out instead of a spray. And we'll do that all over the tag, and then just let it sit a second. And when we put the water on, it's going to remove some of the ink. So I'm going to take a dry paper towel and just press it down onto the tag, and then you can see the ink is coming through, and it'll just lift off some of that ink to give it a little more interest and texture to your tag. And now that our background is done, it's time to add some words. And I'm using the Tim Holtz Ideology Clipping Sticker Book. I love this sticker book. It has the most whimsical, random sayings that are so much fun. And I'm going to apply these by using Letter It adhesive foam tape. This is a clear tape, and it'll just give it some dimension. I've already cut it in half, and I stuck it on the back here, and I just have to remove the liner tape. And once I do that, I'll stick it down towards the bottom, and it says the most beautiful thing, and this says after the last long rain, and I'll stick that underneath here in the garden. And when I tell you I did not plan this, but isn't that perfect? The most beautiful thing after the last long rain in the garden, of course, is a rose. Okay, so next we're going to add a bow with some Ideology mummy cloth. And I've cut it the length of my craft sheet here, which is 18 inches. I found that's a perfect length to make a bow. And I'm just going to add a little distress ink to it to give it some color, just swiping some vintage photo randomly. I had some leftover ink on my craft sheet that I was rubbing in. Add some spun sugar, and then some walnut stain, and I think that looks good. And then I'll tie a bow by making some bunny ears and then pulling it through, and then I'll adjust it a little bit here just to make it pretty. And then I'm going to attach it with some Distress Collage Medium. I'll put a dot on the back of the knot here. And then we'll stick it on to the tag right there. And I think I'm going to trim that one edge a little bit, like so. Maybe a little more. Okay, and I think that's it. I have to say that I really love how this tag came out. It's so grungy, but yet it's so pretty and shabby, and I hope you like it too. So if you'd like to give this a try, we have a link to the full supply list in the description box below. And for more crafty videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.
Hey everyone, it's Tim Holtz, and today I'm so excited to announce the introduction of 4 new distress accessory products from Ranger. Now I'm going to do a little snippet video of each one and kind of show you its features and benefits, but let me give you an overall introduction. First we have the new Distress DIY, Distress It Yourself ink pad, Distress Microglaze, we have a Distress Sprayer, and Distress Refresher. And all 4 of these products are really going to change your whole world of distress because they work with all the distress products. Let's take a look. Alright, so I'm excited to introduce you to the Distress Sprayer. Now, really what I love about this is sold as an empty spray bottle that is designed to be filled simply with water. That's really what it's designed for. That's what I fill it with. And what's unique about this are some of the features that I've wanted in a sprayer. So before I really show you this, I'm just going to talk about some backgrounds. I'm just going to work as I normally would and quickly ink a tag just using my blending tool. Just going to add some color. Now I wanted to do a sprayer like this because as I've taught so many different classes and when I demo and do creative chemistry and I do techniques on my blog, I get a lot of people asking about some of the water effects I'm able to achieve on the background. And because I've been distressing for so long, I can pretty much take a lot of different types of spray bottles and manipulate the spray pattern to get it to work. But I've come to realize that it's easier for me but not so easy for a lot of other people. So I've been on kind of this quest to find the perfect spray bottle, and I believe that we have. So just going to get some ink on there. Just want to blend some colors just so you can see some of the effects that this sprayer is going to have. So that's what we have. We've got an ink tag. Pretty simple, right? Well, here's some of the features of the Distress Sprayer. So you fill it with water. One of my favorite things is on the neck of this bottle right here, and I'm going to try to hold this high. There's a switch here that's going to toggle back and forth. That is a lock. So it's actually labeled, so where it says lock, that means this sprayer is locked. It's not going to squeeze. So if I'm traveling, I put it in a bag, I do something, it's not going to misfire and get things everywhere. So I can lock it when I'm not using it. If I'm hanging it up, any of that, I don't have to worry about when I pick it up that I'm going to spray water. So when I'm ready to use it, I simply push the button and that's going to unlock it. Now, when I go to spray it, it's going to be a great all-over spray. So I'll just show you just on the craft sheet. You can just hear it. It's just wonderful mist. So if I'm working on a large area now, so I want to work on, say, a canvas or an art journal, I'm able to really get a lot of water distributed evenly instead of creating these bursts. And what's also important for this is I wanted a bottle that's going to hold more water. Most of our spray bottles only hold 2 ounces of water, or the mini mist, or even less. This is going to be 4 ounces, so it's going to give me plenty of water to work with, right? But here is really the most important thing. Let me clean off that water to put that in. One of the things I love is to create a splatter effect. So to do that with this, all you need to do now is you're just going to squeeze the trigger just halfway, and look at what we get. We get those wonderful drips and drops that so many people say, gosh, how do you do that? And I normally say, oh, you hold the neck sideways and you just kind of a little pressure. Now it's easy. You just squeeze the trigger halfway down, and every time I do that, it's just going to give me these great little droplets of water on my background. Just going to dry that with a heat tool. I'll go in, blot off some of the excess. So now when you see these really cool kind of water patterns on the ink, the Distress Sprayer just makes it easy as that. So I can go with an all-over full mist, or just pulling the trigger halfway. I'm going to get those great little drips, and when I'm finished, lock it up, set it aside, we'll dry this. So you can see that something just that seems pretty simple, pretty common as a spray bottle, well, now that we have the perfect distress sprayer, I think you're going to love it.
Subscribe. Click on the bell. Like, comment, share.